Welcome to The Explainer. We're diving into a real puzzle today, one that comes to us from Ghana. Picture this. A country launches a celebrated, ambitious policy to give every single child a free education. Sounds great, right? But what happens when years later, huge numbers of kids are still not in school? To figure this out, we have to look past the obvious answers and dig into the hidden, and honestly, far more interesting politics of what school is even for. So here's the central question that kicks this whole thing off. You've got this fantastic promise of free education for every child. But in reality, there's a huge gap. Classrooms are missing a massive number of kids. So yeah, why? What's going on here?
And we're not talking about a small number either. We're talking about roughly 1 million children. 1 million. Just let that sink in for a second. For a country that made a universal education a top national priority, that's not just a crack in the system, that's a giant hole.
Okay, so let's get into the weeds a bit. First, what exactly was this policy? Because let's be clear, this wasn't some small-time initiative. This was a huge national undertaking. At the heart of it all was this program called the Free Compulsory Universal Basic Education Program, or FCUBE for short. It was a big deal. It expanded free schooling all the way up to 11 years of education. You know, on the world stage, this thing looked like a model for everyone else to follow. And they really put their money where their mouth was. This wasn't just talk. Ghana seriously ramped up its spending, pushing it to over 5% of its entire GDP. And get this, half of that money went straight into this basic schooling program. So, you've got a strong policy, you've got the cash to back it up. What on earth went wrong? All right, so the first and probably most common explanation you'll hear for this puzzle is all about economics. Let's call it the market view. It's this idea that you should think about education just like you think about any other product you might buy. Now, this whole way of thinking is guided by an idea called neoliberalism. It sounds complicated, but it's basically a way of looking at social issues like education or healthcare as if they were a marketplace. And in that market, people, parents and students, are just rational customers making calculated choices. So from this market point of view, the student is seen in one of two ways. On one hand, you've got the student as a consumer, kind of like they're shopping for the best educational deal for themselves. But on the other hand, the state sees the student as human capital, like an asset that it's investing in to make the whole country's workforce stronger and more competitive. Okay, so if you're looking through this market lens, the answer to our puzzle seems pretty simple. A family just makes a rational choice. They look at the costs of sending a kid to school, and that includes losing that kid's help on the farm or at home, and they weigh that against the potential payoff down the road. If the math doesn't work out, the kid stays home. It's a really neat and tidy explanation, but something tells me it's not the whole story. But what if we've been looking at this all wrong? What if education isn't really a marketplace at all? Let's try on a second lens, one that completely reframes the issue. This view says that schooling isn't a product. It's a political tool. And the key idea here is something called hegemony. It's the idea that education is never neutral. It's actually a super powerful tool that societies use to reinforce their dominant values, to make the beliefs of the people in charge feel like just, common sense for everybody. I mean, think about it. For centuries, this has been the main job of schools run by the state. It wasn't just about reading and writing. It was about creating loyal citizens, building a single national identity, and churning out a disciplined workforce for a national economy. In other words, schools are there to build the nation-state. So now let's take this political lens and apply it back to the situation on the ground in Ghana, because this is where the light bulb really goes on, and you start to see this fundamental clash of two different worlds. First, you have to get your head around this number because it's absolutely staggering. An estimated 90% of the entire workforce in Ghana operates in the informal economy. We're talking about small-scale farming, local trading, apprenticeships, not the 9-to-5 salary jobs that a formal school system is designed for. And boom, here it is. This is the heart of the problem. The entire model of formal schooling is built on the assumptions you see on the left. Your loyalty is to the nation, you'll work in a formal economy, and a diploma is what matters. But for the vast majority of people in Ghana, the reality, the stuff that actually matters day to day, is on the right. Loyalty is to your family, your tribe. The economy is informal. And the skills that get you ahead are learned through hands-on apprenticeships. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. Parents and kids see the proof right in front of them every day. As this researcher points out, even getting a university degree is no guarantee of a good job anymore. When you see educated people you know ending up in informal work anyway, you can't help but start to think, maybe school is a waste of time.
And this mismatch gets even more pronounced when you look at gender. Only about 9% of women in Ghana are in formal, waged jobs. For most women, their economic lives are completely woven into the informal world of family and local trade. So formal schooling, which was historically designed to prepare a male workforce for factory and office jobs, feels even more disconnected from the reality of their futures.
So what's the upshot of all this? The problem isn't necessarily that the FCUB policy was bad or that the economic lens is completely wrong. The real issue is that the policy was designed for a world that doesn't actually exist for most of the people it was trying to serve. It's a fundamental mismatch. So, here's how we cracked the case. We started with the puzzle. Why were 1 million kids missing from school? We checked out the usual suspect, the market explanation. But then, we brought in a new political lens, and that revealed the real culprit, a formal Western-style school system crashing head-on into a deeply informal society. And that brings us to the big takeaway. Policies like this are built on a set of assumptions that we in the West just take for granted. Things like a strong central state, a formal economy being the norm, and a shared idea of citizenship. But in this context, those things aren't the main event. The informal systems of family, community, and local economy are way more powerful and relevant to how people actually live their lives. You can't just copy-paste a system and expect it to work. And that leaves us with a final, really provocative question that goes way beyond Ghana. If our big international development policies are designed based on assumptions that just don't fit the reality on the ground, well, how many other well-meaning solutions are we setting up to fail before they even get started? It's definitely something to think about.